BBC 97.3. This is London's biggest conversation with Ian Collins.
There is something afoot over the Atlantic. Oh yes, it's bad. There are rumblings going on in the United States, and we are aware that it's a country with a entire spectrum of events in terms of the good, the bad, and sometimes just the godforsaken ugly. All sorts of things happen stateside. I often say, economically, when America sneezes, the rest of us catch a cold, and the like. But there is something really, I think, that is much bigger than that, much bigger than the first black man becoming a president in the United States, bigger than the issue of the fiscal cliff. Oh yes, it could be, and this will sound ridiculous, it could be that Mr. Piers Morgan, the chat show fella, is deported from the United States. There you go, I've said it, you've heard it here first. Right now, scribes in Fleet Street are writing that one down, getting ready. Oh, they already have. Yes, there is a campaign to deport Piers Morgan. This is a man who, again, his own past is incredibly checkered too. He sits rather nicely in that respect against the backdrop of the United States. On this occasion, of course, he's been quite outspoken about guns, reference the mass shooting just a couple of weeks ago. And, of course, the gun lobby didn't like that much. They didn't go a bundle on what he had to say. And they've signed a petition, and there is a petition. Lots and lots of people have signed it. It could mean that, much like the law over here, that if you have a petition, it gets talked about in Parliament. Could it be that Congress discuss Piers Morgan? Is he really likely to be deported? Let's speak to a man who can shine some light on this. Dr. James Boys, Senior Visiting Research Fellow at King's College, London. James, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
I'm very well. That's a massive title I just gave you there. If you put all of that together, of course, you'd never get it on a name badge. That's for sure.
Not a chance.
Well, you're very welcome, James, and lovely to speak with you. But it is, it's a story that the Piers Morgan story. First of all, I laughed at it, and I thought, isn't that hilarious? Piers Morgan could be coming back. Then I got scared that he might be coming back, and then I was starting to think about the sort of constitutional aspect of this. Is this a serious campaign, or is this just something that's going to make a few headlines for the NRA?
Well, you mentioned in your introduction there the good, the bad and the ugly. I'm not quite sure where we fit Piers Morgan on that spectrum. It's often said, of course, that Americans don't do irony. Here, with regard to the Constitution, is a great irony. Here you have a group of Americans who are petitioning to deport Piers Morgan for supposedly attacking the Second Amendment to the Constitution, whilst at the same time denying his rights safeguarded under the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of speech.
Yeah.
So there's a real contradiction there, and I think it speaks to the kind of individuals who are signing this, that perhaps they don't necessarily see the contradictions in what it is they are doing.
Of course.
What's interesting also is that the petitions of which we speak about are posted on the White House website, and much like the Downing Street website, which you alluded to in your introduction there,
yes.
Necessitates if there's a certain amount of petitions, the government will suggest that they're going to give time to Parliament. In the US, you've got to get 25,000 petitions in a 30-day period. But unlike in the UK, where there will be a parliamentary response, all the White House is obliged to do is to respond. So there's no guarantee that nothing to do with Congress in regard to this at this point. There's 91,000 on one petition. Another petition, which is very similar wording, has 12,000. So this has attracted some attention, and of all the petitions on there, it is one of the most popular. Need to put this into context, however, because 33,000 people have signed a petition calling for the construction of a Death Star by 2016. So that gives you some idea about some of the lunatic fringe which are filling these petitions out.
Frankly, James, I'm failing to see what's wrong with that. In fact, I might even go and sign it myself.
Yes, you remember, of course, the Death Star didn't actually work so well in the end. They got blown up twice within a series of three films.
It didn't have a lucky streak, really.
Not so much.
But
a design flaw, if you will.
It is interesting, the America. That almost ferociousness with which certain sectors of America will deny the very free speech that sits so proudly in their constitution. Is that sort of, and it is the dictionary definition of an irony, isn't it? But is it lost on these people that they seem to be arguing against almost their own case constitutionally?
Yeah, it's a distinct possibility. I think one needs to go beyond this and recognise the fact that there's almost certainly going to be some sort of jingoistic element to this. Piers Morgan, of course, is an outspoken British journalist who has gone across the United States in a very high-profile manner. He's taken over from an American icon, Larry King, and his chat show on CNN, which, of course, ran for several decades. None of this will do his ratings any harm.
Of course it won't.
CNN at this point are staying quite quiet, I think, waiting to see how this all pans out. But the problem, of course, is that what this does do is detract attention from where it should be. Because obviously Piers Morgan is trying to suggest in his view, the stupidity of American gun laws. But what he's doing is he's personalizing the issue so that the right wing in America will look at this and say, you see, these pinko liberal Europeans want to take away our right to guns, and it could end up energizing the right against the movement which could be perceived to be underway in Washington, which I think is being overplayed slightly, and remove the focus away from the fatalities and the deaths of the children and the teachers where it should be, or to placate the rather large ego of Mr. Morgan.
I noticed also that he said later, or the early part of this week, that he wanted the Bible to be rewritten to include a reference to gay marriage. Now, surely this has to be Piers Morgan really trying to play with the American right now, isn't it?
Well, I think he is, but as John Lennon would have rightly testified, if you take on the Christian right in the United States, you really do so at your great peril.
Correct.
And I think that I really think that Piers Morgan has to be very, very careful about how he proceeds at this point, because taking on the gun lobby is one thing, taking on the Christian right is another, and it could well be that he ends up returning to the United Kingdom, not necessarily under the volition of the United States government, but because of the petitions that hit CNN and potential threats to advertising, which could
well, that's
the network.
That's a really good point, isn't it? And I mean, in fact, I'm only thinking about it now, but in many respects, his comments about the Bible could turn out to be more dangerous and damaging for him than the comments about guns and gun ownership.
I believe so. The NRA are under siege at the moment because of what's happened recently in Connecticut. But if you start taking on the Bible Belt and the huge Christian movement in the United States, they've got a great buying power with regard to advertising. If they suddenly decide to start boycotting CNN, all of a sudden, I think, the old saying that money talks, that could have a huge impact. It's worth mentioning, however, that there are 2,500 people who signed a petition calling for his protection under the First Amendment and certainly don't want him returned to the United Kingdom. So I think it is working both ways. I was
going to say, I might have to start another petition just to let that underway. But
it's already out there, I assure you, Ian.
We will see. Listen, James, great to have you on with us. Lovely to speak.
Thank you, Ian.
Dr. James Boyes, he's Senior Visiting Research Fellow at King's College London. We should get James on the panel, Amanda, at some point. I think he'd be fabulous.